every individual to EC2, Engineer Clarity Community. Hi, my name is Mark Boersma, President of Synergy Solutions, and EC2 asked me to share some things today that might change your life forever. Which of the three categories would this fall into? People, business, or life? People, business, life. People, business, life. I don't know. Like, it's all of them. I don't know. Do I have to fit it in? Yes, you have to fit it into one. So I don't even know. So when we look at the transfer from one generation to the next, we often teach the generation that we're the next generation. We teach them the task or the specifics, and we don't teach them the warm belly rub. Now, you might be saying, what is the warm belly rub? And that's a great question. So if you all don't know me, I am Mark Boersma. I am an international speaker and author. I have 3 degrees in business, 3 bachelor's degrees in business. One is finance, another one in management, and another one in marketing. I know worldwide thought leaders. I've been invited to the White House. I have co-authored books with international thought leaders. I've written 16 books and over 80 white papers. If I was speaking to people, I would go ahead and say that the more I know in life, the more I know I don't know. If I'm speaking in business, I would say I'm brilliant, massively successful. I'm part of the 3% that survived the first 7 years in business. Now I'm in my 29th year. And if I'm speaking to you about life, I'm like, I am the stupidest person on the planet. So it could, again, I don't know where EC2 is going to put this one. I'm going to leave that up to them. So I don't know. I was probably in my late 30s, I'm guessing. What have I been? I want to get it right here. Because my oldest daughter, so my wife and I, we've been blessed with 35 years of marriage as of today's recording. And I have 7 children. I have 3 sons-in-laws, a daughter-in-law, and I have 5 grandchildren. And another one on the way. I'm excited. Anyways, so Ginger Ann, my oldest daughter, she was probably, I'm guessing, 12 years old maybe. She's 30, so this would have been 18 years ago. And so I remember when I got first into sales. Don, remember when you first got into sales?
Oh, yeah.
Were you as pathetic in sales as I was when I got in, Don?
I had no clue.
Okay. I don't think you could have been worse than me. Theoretically, it's possible, but I don't think so. I made $1 an hour the first 3 months I was in the industry. Were you as pathetic as that, Don, or not? Probably not.
Much, but the only thing I had going for me was that I was a friendly guy.
Okay. See, I didn't have that going for me. So,
that's why I brought it up.
Right. And so I made $1 an hour. This was not good because my wife and I were married when we were sophomores in college. We both graduated the same. Well, I graduated a year early. Then I picked up 2 more degrees. So we both graduated. I graduated with 3 degrees. She graduated with her elementary education degree. We decided to start a family right away. And when I mean right away, I mean right away, where she had 4 months left in, to do student teaching to get her degree. And she's like, honey, we should start, trying to get pregnant because it takes a long time. Me not being that smart said, I've heard it takes a long time, so okay, we can get started. It didn't take a long time. Bam, she was pregnant. And so she went through student teaching, pregnant, and morning sickness and all that kind of stuff. Then she graduated. I graduated my 3rd. I had 6 job offers coming out of college. The only job offer I knew I didn't want to take was sales because I didn't like salespeople, never want to be a salesperson. But It was very important for my wife to be able to stay at home with our kids, and so I knew I had to have a 2-income family on 1 income. It's like that's pretty obvious. My in-laws were like, well, why don't you get a real job, Mark, and then you can save up money and, and then sometime later. I'm like, I don't think I'll ever be able to do that if I don't take the jump now. So I got into sales, had two sales, straight commission sales with a mortgage company. They'd only been in business 2 years or 1 year, and they gave me 2 days of training, and they said, go sell. I thought, people tell me 2 days, that's really good back then. And so, but it wasn't.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
That's what Don was going to say. Like 2 days, you had 2 days of training, but it wasn't that good of 2 days.
You had training?
Don will laugh. My first mortgage that I wrote it up as a refinance when it was a purchase. Like what? Like it was just like. Anyways, little mortgage humor there. Yeah, and they actually were one of the happiest clients I ever had, which was interesting. Anyways, so I struggled. Went in after 3 months. I went in the president's company office and I pounded on his desk and I said, I have a wife who's now 6 months pregnant. Hope you're all tracking with me, time zone. I'm like I'm making $1 an hour, Tony, and we bought a house at the same time. So my wife's 6 months pregnant. 100% straight commission. I'm making $1 an hour. We buy a house. She's not going to work outside the home. And so I pound on the desk and I say, Tony, I'm doing everything you guys are telling me to do. And he's like, well, Mark, it takes, 12 to 18 months to really succeed in this industry. They didn't tell me that in the interview. And so I'm like, but I didn't have time to whine. There's a lot of whiners today. Don and I grew up in a day where you whined, you go out of business. It's simple. Don't whine. Like, get out there, figure it out. If the systems don't work, which they didn't work, then fix it. So I'm like, okay. And I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? And he said, what do you think you ought to do? I said, well, I don't know. I think I ought to do these 3 things. So he said, well, go do them. Fortunately for me, I'd started a number of my own companies while I was in college. One of those was a computer company. So I had more computing power at home than the whole company had. And so I went out there and I said, okay, Mark, what are you good at? I love people. Like, if you know me, you know how much I love you. I don't like people, though. That's not good for being in sales. So I don't like to be around. I'm an introvert. People bug me like crazy. And so I don't like being around people. I'm not social. I'm not outgoing. And so that's not good for sales.
I think it's because you have a challenge with people that are incompetent.
Like, Don's trying to distract me, but I will stay focused. Like, don't even get me going on that. Anyways, he's right. But so what I do is I took stock of myself. So what are you good at, Mark? So I have an oldest brother, and he's a CPA. My youngest sister is a medical doctor. There's 2 other brothers, 1 other sister. And I struggled in school. So I'm not a smart person. I'm a below average person. For sure, in most everything in life. Everything in life seems to come very hard for me. Anyways, so I said, Mark, you're not really good at things, but you can study people and you're good at putting things into systems. So I'm 23 years old, 22, 23, probably 23 years old. And so what I did is I studied and I figured out a system on what I could do to differentiate myself from everybody else in the marketplace. So it took me a month to come up with that first system. So I've been out there 4 months. Again, track the times. It's important, especially for firstborn and analytics. Like, it's important. Anyways, so I went out there with the first system, accomplished more in a week than I had in 4 months. Now, it doesn't take a brain surgeon or a rocket science to understand, like, I'm onto something, right? And so I started, really cranking, and all of a sudden my business started to improve, and all of a sudden I started to and I actually got promoted to a regional manager, after 6 months of being in the industry. Now, I was still 100% straight commission. Now, in addition to selling, I got to, recruit people who didn't know what they were doing any more than I did. So I started recruiting people, and my systems not only worked for me, but they actually worked for other people. 6 months after that, I was promoted to a marketing manager, a regional manager, 6 months after that, marketing manager, and then a year and a half after that, offered a position as VP of sales with an equity position in the company. I had a goal of hitting six-figure income within 7 years. I did that in a year and a half. When I left that company to start my own company, at the age of 27, I was on track to make $460,000 and had over $1 million in equity. Left that company to pursue my dreams. Now, in the midst of that process, I became very successful as a leader, and I had built up other salespeople, but then I brought in assistants for me and for those other salespeople, and I could never figure out how to create, like, you bring in an assistant, you think, I'm going to bring him in at 40 hours a week, right? And I'm going to save 40 hours. No. It seemed like often for some way too long of a period of time that not only did I not save 40 hours, but I actually was spending a buku amount of money, and I was working more hours than I was saving. It's like most people just give up on that. I kept pressing forward and finally kind of figured out some things, but it really frustrated me. Then I started my own company, executive coaching company. Well, most of our clients refer to us as executive coaches or business coaches, which is fine, but we're really architects or engineers. We engineer, architect business operating systems or boss systems, okay? So you're all tracking it. So I start my own company, build up all kinds of unbelievable world-class systems, and then I bring on an entire team that they can coach actually better than I can, but everybody wants me to coach. They don't want any of, my team coaching them. They want me coaching. One day I'm really struggling. I'm exhausted. I feel like a mom who has triplets, who's nursing, and it's like, man, I'm exhausted. So one day I come home and I'm really frustrated, and I'm like, I can't delegate anything. Everybody wants to work with me. Like, this is so terrible. I mean, I was probably having a pity party rather than fixing the situation. I might have been whining. I walk in the door. We have 5 kids at that time, and by that time, and my wife, what does she do? She's much better at delegation than I am. So she delegates. The youngest one is Angela. Again, you might want to take notes on this. It gets complicated. We have 7 now, 5 then, okay? Angela's the youngest. She's in diapers. She needs a diaper change, okay? I probably put in, a 15, 17-hour day, and I come home and my wife says, honey, can you change Angela's diaper? So, Don, what's my response?
You got to be kidding me.
No, I wasn't that big of a whiner.
Okay.
I wasn't that big of a whiner.
So the only other alternative is, sure, honey, I'll do it.
No, there's another one. Because the youngest one, we had 5 at the time. There was the youngest one. And so I said to the oldest one.
It depends on how the oldest one.
The oldest one, I think, was maybe 12.
Oh, well, that's an easy one.
Right?
12-year-old, Ginger Ann?
Right.
Can you change that diaper?
Right, Ginger Ann. Hey, change the diaper. So I delegated. I was a master delegator. And so I delegated. And I said, Ginger Ann, hey, change your sister's diaper. Well, the youngest one, she started crying because she wanted mommy or daddy to change the diaper. Well, this was not my first rodeo. I'm not a happy camper. But she's a baby. I can't yell at her. I can't scream at her and say, what's wrong with you? And the oldest one's only 12. Like, it's not her fault that the baby's crying. Or maybe it is her fault. I don't know. But I'm like, Mark, I took ownership. Something my mom, who passed away 4 years ago, one of the closest people in my life to me, miss her immensely. But she's actually not gone because she's still with me today as I think about how she taught me to take ownership as a small child. So I took ownership as a young dad, and I said, Angela, lay down, your sister's changing your diaper. Now, I had done that before, to be honest. But I never stuck around to look at what the problem was. And so dutifully, Angela, she was by that age, she knew she best obey her father, and so she dutifully laid down, and Ginger Ann dutifully went to change her diaper. And then all of a sudden, everything became clear. Like my 3 degrees in business didn't teach me this. Being an international speaker and author didn't teach me this. Going to the White House, they didn't teach me this. All the really smart worldwide leaders, they didn't teach me this. Who taught me this? My 12-year-old daughter and my baby daughter. And what we had done is either we were not good teachers, my wife and I, or Ginger Ann wasn't a great student, or maybe both. But the poor naked baby is laying on a cold floor. Well, of course she's going to cry. In addition to that, Ginger Ann somehow did not pick up that she's supposed to go ahead and tickle her and give her a hug and make sure her belly's warm. She didn't, we taught her all of the mechanics, but we didn't teach her the warm belly rubs. And I'm like, oh my gracious, no wonder this doesn't work. This is why systems don't work, because we don't embed all the warm belly rubs. Now, Don and I are not old. We are young. I mean, when people see me and see that I have 5 grandkids, they're like, Mark, seriously. They're like, Mark, you're way too young to have 5 grandkids. Yeah. So Don and I are super young. We started out, if you've ever seen the movie Boss Baby, that they made that after Don and I, just saying. At least that's what my kids have said. So anyways, it dawned on me, that's why I could never transfer anything over to other people. It's also why none of my systems were working like I wanted to, because we never embedded. So changing a baby's diaper, you don't have to go ahead and lay them down on a cold, on a warm floor, or put a blanket underneath them. You don't have to do any of those things unless you want a raving fan experience. And so we didn't teach Ginger Ann the raving fan experience, how to make that experience. So she was excited about being changed by her sister rather than her mom or dad. Now, this session actually is compliments of business sense from everyday moms. And so for any C-level executives, you're probably, just saying, you're probably a white male over 60. Because a lot of C-level executives, that's what they are. You're talking to other C-level executives that are also white males over 50. And Don and I will, I don't know, I won't speak for Don. For me, I'm telling you, white males over 50 seem to be some of the most clueless people on the planet to me. I'm not saying other people around are less clueless or more clueless. They're just clueless. I don't get what they've been doing their whole life. But anyways, so if you're a C-level executive, have you ever heard of the warm belly rub principle? Probably not. Has it ever been taught to you in an MBA course? Probably not. Have you ever heard anybody say it? Probably not. Where did I pick this up? I picked this up from my mom. I picked this up by being the second oldest of 6 kids. I picked this up from my wife and just saying how amazing of a mother she has been, a great, amazing mother and grandmother. I picked this up from my 7 kids. I picked this up from my 4 daughters, who are just amazing young women. And so the answer to our challenges in business, one of the answers to that is the warm belly rub. Now, let's continue on with this story. Ginger Ann grows up, and she continues to grow. She's, probably 14 years old. And my dad and mom, my dad was a pastor and a missionary. So they started a number of churches. That's where I got my entrepreneurial skills from. Go in, start from nothing. Don't whine about it. Don't complain. Get out there, boots in the street, connect with people, build something up from nothing. That's before they had all the mega churches and all the church in the box and all this other stuff. This is just old-fashioned hard work, just like starting your own company. So after they had done this, they found they have a ministry called Phones for You, where they'd go into struggling churches that were dying or brand new churches just getting started, and they would reach out to 20 to 50,000 people via the phone. Ginger Ann said, because we were homeschooling her, she graduated when she was 16 years old. So we were homeschooling her, and then she went on and in 4 years picked up her bachelor's degree in psychology when she turned 20. And so she's pretty, driven young woman. Now she's an amazing mother, amazing wife of 4 kids, four of our grandkids. A son that's 7, who actually is helping Don with some amazing things. The kid's a great kid in business. He's got his own business at the age of 7. And then a 5-year-old brother, and then twin girls who are 2.5. Anyways, so Ginger Ann says, hey, Dad, can I go ahead and go on a trip with Grandpa and Grandma and make phone calls? I'm like, sure. So she started doing that, and they took over the homeschooling when they were traveling, and they'd go out for a couple months, and she'd make phone calls at the age of 13, 14 years old. Then there was a trip out to the East Coast. Now, if you're listening from the East Coast, don't take anything I say personally. I love you. Got some great, friends, family on the East Coast. East Coast a little different, though, than the rest of the country. I'm just saying. Anyways, Ginger Ann went ahead and said, Dad, there's an opportunity to go out to the, to the East Coast and make some phone calling with Grandpa and Grandma. I'm like, okay, cool. She said, but I need money. I'm like, okay, well, you know how to earn money. She's like, well, won't you go ahead? Won't you go ahead and give me the money? I'm like, no, I'm not going to give you the money. She's like, but Dad, it's for a great cause. It's for your parents. I'm like, no, you have to figure it out. You have to learn how to do it. So she kind of worked through it. A few months later, or a few weeks later, she comes to me. She says, Dad, I still haven't figured out how to make money. I'm like, well, honey, you got to do that. And she's like, okay, Dad, what if, your company, what if I go out there, make some phone calls for your company, would your company pay for me? I'm like, well, now she's talking. So I'm like, at that time, we didn't have, much business on the East Coast. I said, honey, if you go, so she's, again, 13, 14 years old. If you go out to the East Coast, honey, and you open up the East Coast for us, then my company will pay for you to go, your trip to go out there. Now, what I didn't tell her, because you got to let your kids grow up, right? I didn't tell her, honey, you've been around the country with your grandparents making a bunch of phone calls, but the East Coast, it's a little tougher market out there. You're going to get eaten alive. I didn't tell her that. So she goes out there, and she starts making phone calls. After a day, maybe 2 days, she calls me up, and she's crying. Like, think of this. Like, internalize all of this. Even, you have a 13-year-old daughter. Like, she's doing a good thing. She calls up and she says, Daddy, I love when they say daddy when they're 13. It's like, yep, they're going for your heart. She's like, they're hanging up on me and they're swearing at me and they're this and this. And she's like, I hate this. And she's crying. And Don or Michelle or Elise, what was my response to her? She's like, Daddy, I don't want to do this. I can't do this. What was my response to her?
Well, the right response should have been, tell me about it. Great. Get back on the phone and talk some more.
Okay. Well, I said, no problem, honey. You can quit. Any ideas why I said that? Now, I wouldn't have said that to a number of my other kids because I knew they'd take me up on it. But I knew her character. She wouldn't. She's like, well, Dad, I don't want to quit. I'm like, well, honey, then you got to go ahead and figure it out. And so we talked back and forth some, and she's kind of got control of herself. And then she's like, I'm like, honey, you're an amiable analytic. So she's not, outgoing naturally on the phone, especially. She's very reserved, very sweet, very tender-hearted, child. And I'm like, honey, you understand personalities. Use your personality, your friendliness, ask questions, go through all of this. And so she's like, okay, Dad, I'm going to try it. And then she called me up later in the day. She says, it's unbelievable, Dad. I got 3 appointments set for you. And so that has helped her to start a number of her own companies now. She's had like 8 moves. Her husband's in IT, has moved all over the country, and she takes her business, and she's got multiple companies, and she could run them anywhere from the planet. If you're listening to the rebroadcast of this, the recording of this, work with EVAs, ones who have been certified through Life Masteries Institute. If you're a C-level executive, get all your employees on EC2. I mean, it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. One of the things I love about EC2 is that I don't have to go ahead. I don't mind, now I have 5 grandkids, I don't mind teaching them those same principles like good choices, good consequences, bad choices, bad consequences. Did that with just my 2.5-year-old daughter just last week. She and I had a date, and she, put some crayons or some stuff in a video recorder, and I said, honey, when she wanted to watch a video, I said, honey, you put this in here. She's 2.5 years old. And she just looks at me and with those big blue eyes, and she smiles, and I said, honey, that's a bad choice. She said, Grandpa, bad consies? Like, she can't say bad consequences, but at 2.5 years old, she understands the concept. You make a good choice, there's a good consequence. You make a bad choice, there's a bad consequence. This is not brain surgery. This is not rocket science. But for some reason, it seems like a lot of employees, a lot of managers, and yes, even a lot of owners of companies somehow have forgotten what maybe their mom and grandmother taught them. And so that's where Business Sense from Everyday Moms, which is connected in and does partnership with EC2, so you want to participate in that. If you have any questions on anything we covered today, feel free to connect with the individual who invited you to participate in today's session, or you can call toll-free 888-230-2300. That's 888-230-2300. Or if you're calling in outside the U.S., you can call the U.S.-based number at 630-393-9909. That's 630-393-9909. You can go to the website by going to clarity.dnaforsuccess.com/EC2. And always remember, we can accomplish so much more together than we ever could on our own. God bless and have an amazing day. Bye-bye.